Hello and welcome to Read Read. Today I have a kind of different video. This was actually inspired by Noah over at Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, and I wanted to basically just make a video talking about some of the biggest books that I own because he made some videos talking about that. I thought it was very cool and I just wanted to dig through and see what were some of the biggest books that I had. So I have two sort of categories of selections that I want to go through. Some of the books I have read, most of them I haven't, but I'll just talk about why I got them or the history. A lot of them you'll probably know about anyway. But the first category I wanted to actually devote to books of physical size, and there's only about 4 books that I've brought out. But after that we'll go into the next category where I'm talking about, I think, 12 or 13 books in terms of that are big because of their page quality, page number. And so all of the books in that second category are greater than 1,000 pages, and all of them eventually I want to read, but I'll talk about the ones that I have selected. Unfortunately, because I did set the sort of 1,000-page limit, we did lose some great books that I would have liked to have talked about, namely The Recognitions, but then also some other books that I'm looking forward to reading, like 2666 or Anna Karenina. But yeah, we have some other books. Spoiler alert, we do have another Tolstoy book coming up, and you can probably guess what it is. Anyway, I'm going to get started talking about the 4 books, the 4 physically biggest books that I own. And this is a bit of a wild one. I think, funnily enough, this might be the rarest book I own. This is a textbook called The Art of Conduction that is by Lawrence D. Butch Morris, and you can't find this anywhere. The only way I was able to get it was by emailing the editor, Daniela Veronesi, who is a friend of Butch Morris's, and asking her if she had any copies, and she very graciously sent a brand new shrink-wrapped one to me. And so if you don't know about Butch Morris, basically he was a sort of avant-garde jazz composer conductor who pioneered this technique of improvising group ensembles using by basically combining improvisation and conducting, which he called conduction. And he really focused on developing this sort of vocabulary. He really referred to it as a lexicon, so he was very interested in this being a kind of you being able to develop a fluency in this. And I'll get a sort of picture of Butch Morris for some context. But yeah, he was a really incredible innovator in the jazz community, and unfortunately passed away. I feel a bit of a connection with him because Butch Morris is exactly 50 years my elder, which is very, very lovely. But yeah, the book is so the book starts off and it just has his sort of ideas and thoughts on conduction. He talks about what the purposes of the improvisers and the conductor and audience and so on. But then the rest of the book is basically just a explaining what all of the conduction symbols are. So there's upbeats and downbeats, and how you're meant to respond as the improviser. So for example, if he wanted you to play a glissando, he would do a pattern like that, and then you would interpret it, and it didn't really matter what pitch it was or anything like that. But you would just sort of vibe with the ensemble and create these amazing improvised pieces in real time. And people later on, like Walter Thompson, developed these sound painting ideas, and he has this sort of massive lexicon. But I really loved that Butch Morris kind of simplified it and made like a really core. There are about 60 conduction techniques. But yeah, this is the rarest book I own, probably, and I love Butch Morris a lot. But anyway, I'm going to move on. A book that I'm sure a lot of people probably already know, but in terms of physical size, the Cambridge Centenary edition of Ulysses, which has the original text, and as you can sort of see here, and then there is on the side, I believe, Joyce's annotations or his actually corrections, I believe, and then underneath there is annotations from the person Catherine Flynn. Yeah, this is just firstly, it's so lovely to look at, but before each section we have sort of breakdowns. There are sometimes things as lovely as a detailed map that shows where our main characters are walking. This is a really glorious treat, and I think it's funny. I don't even know if I would necessarily read the book Ulysses in this. I would sort of just refer to this for some of the beautiful diagrams and the essays, but but I do definitely want to reread Ulysses, because that's another book that you just sort of accept that you don't understand it, and you keep going. But it's the Cambridge Centenary Ulysses is the next one. Another big one, and I think this featured in Noah's video as well. I do have in my possession the great melting Codex Seraphinianus, I think is how you're meant to pronounce it, Seraphinianus. And this book, I don't want to show so much of it because it is almost like, it is an art piece, and it would be giving away, but it is a book that is written. It is a encyclopedia of a made-up world by Luigi Serafini, and it is written in a made-up language. It has got this, and the sections are subdivided into, people, biology, physics, architecture, and so on. This is a giant book, and it is a beautiful art piece. And if you get a chance, really do pick it up. You obviously can't read it because it's. I believe Serafini talked about how it's not meant to be deciphered. It's sort of meant to be the text that he constructed is meant to create the feeling of being a young child who can't read, staring at a book and just sort of taking in all of these indecipherable signs. And I think that he does an amazing job with that. There are some things I'll just give you. I'll find one really glorious page. Just take a look at that. Please give it a chance. I know it's quite expensive, but it is an art book and it's very worth your time. The physically biggest book I own is definitely the Dreamtime book. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories that have paintings by Ainsley Roberts, and the text is by Charles P. Mountford. And I don't really know how I came across this. I think I was given it by a family member. But we just have these really short Aboriginal Dreamtime stories with these just glorious artworks on the other side. So something of the fire tree, the Southern Cross, and just oh my, look at that art. Jeez, I'm just absolutely. I really owe it to myself to dig through and read some of these. The death of Giannini. And yeah, most of these, I think most if not all of these stories just fit on one page, and they have the complementary artwork on the side. So yeah, physically biggest book I own. It's like maybe two or half a centimeter taller than the Codex Seraphinianus. But yeah, those are the 4 books that belong in the physical size category. We're now going to begin talking about more conventional books, ones that you've probably heard of. And we're talking about page numbers now. So the first book is Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellman, which is 1,030 pages. The great 1,030 page single sentence, which I have not yet read, but I am very keen to. Of course, I loved reading Molly Bloom's soliloquy in Ulysses, and I think there's another book. I think it's War and War by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I think that's another book that is sections that are all just single sentences. But this is another book where I know there are some breaks, right? There are sort of interludes where it stops and. It stops with a comma, and then it goes into some of these sections, which I guess you can use these as a break or a chapter break or something. But one of the things I'm worried about is just when I start, how do I stop? But I'm sure you would get into it, and you would instinctively feel because of syntax and structure, you would know when a sentence kind of sort of is meant to end. But yeah, Lucy Ellman, definitely want to get to that. Okay, the first of these books that I have read, David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, which is 1,079 pages long, famously 1,079 pages long. I think it is sort of marketed that way, and I think I remember hearing his editor, Michael Peach, saying that it was a million words long. Yeah, I've read this book, and I have made a video talking about it. I really loved it. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about Infinite Jest. The next book, this is kind of a funny one. The Holy Bible, KJV, 1,046 pages. I felt like 1,146 pages, sorry. So I felt like I needed to talk about this because even though it looks physically small, yeah, we have squeezed 1,146 pages in, and yeah, I've read first two books. I've read Genesis and Exodus, but I need to move on and read more of it, and that's maybe a this year thing. Maybe I have some plans, but we'll see how it turns out. Against the Day, Thomas Pynchon, 1,220 pages. I have, I think, 3 Pynchon books left to read. I plan on reading Bleeding Edge and Mason and Dixon this year. I don't know if I'll get around to Against the Day, but but that will be the last Pynchon that I have to read, or this will be the last Pynchon that I have to read, I guess. And I know that this is sort of structured as a series of short stories, so there's like a sci-fi thing, and there's a Bildungsroman and so on, but which might make it easier to read because it'll be subcategorized. But yeah, Against the Day, one of the biggest books. Alan Moore, Jerusalem. The only Alan Moore, it is 1,296 pages, just a little bit short of 1,300. Alan Moore's Jerusalem, I did get this big complete version, and I'm almost sort of avoiding learning about this book because I know it's going to be I know it's going to interest me, and obviously I like Alan Moore's writing. I really liked Watchmen and V for Vendetta, and I do want to get around to buying like an omnibus of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Let me know some other Alan Moore that would be cool to read, but yeah, I'm sort of just avoiding because, oh my god, even like looking at this page number, it's still got absolutely tiny font, so this book is going to feel a lot longer than it actually looks. But yeah, Alan Moore's Jerusalem, a lot of people have talked about it, and I'm keen to eventually read it. This is one, I don't know if this quite makes it in, if it's a bit of a technicality, the 1Q84 trilogy from Haruki Murakami, which is 1,318 pages. I was like, oh, do I include a trilogy, because I decided not to include sort of omnibuses or things. I have the complete William Shakespeare that didn't make it in, but I thought, yeah, I mean, I've not seen this really be sold as separate books, and I think that even if they're sort of subcategorized, I've almost always seen people just buy this whole complete thing. So yeah, Murakami, I've read Norwegian Wood, really liked it. The first video on my channel was me talking about Kafka on the Shore, which I was a bit about, but I would like to read this. Yeah, I think anything sort of longer form, I'm going to gravitate towards, and maybe have more, well, obviously I'll have more to say about it because there'll be more of it, but yeah. Only 1 page longer than 1Q84 is The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, 1,319 pages, and I bought a very small Dover edition of what I thought was The Tale of Genji, and it showed up, and it was quite short, and I read it, and I thought, oh yeah, this was fine. And then I looked it up and I realized that it was only the first 10 chapters of a very long novel, and so I did pick up this complete version, and so yeah, I guess I've read the first, let's just say I've read the first 10th of it. I don't know, let's say there's 100 sections. That's all I've read, and I think this is in a different translation as well. Another big one, and I think it would be very cool to eventually cross off the list, but Tale of Genji it's just so long, oh my gosh. The Anatomy of Melancholy, Robert Burton, 1,324 pages, and I think this is the non-fiction book that I am most attracted to. Just looking at it, looking at the idea, the systematic breakdown of melancholy, and just skimming through and reading snippets, I can't believe that a book like this exists, because it seems like such a book for me, but I have still not yet kind of added it to my TBR shelf, and yeah, it just seems like this glorious mess, this hodgepodge of all these things that Burton wanted to talk about, and I know eventually I'm going to read it. I might even force myself to put this on my next year's TBR shelf, so yeah. And on the topic of some other sort of essays, unfortunately, Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex didn't make it onto the list. The copy I have is only about 850 pages, but that's another one that I do want to put onto the list. Next up, our foreshadowed Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, 1,399 pages in this Penguin Classics edition. I think right now there's a lot of people on Instagram doing a group read, and oh man, it is so long, and I know I want to read Anna Karenina first. I think that this is a book that I'll get to maybe within 5 years, but it's not going to be read this year, it's not going to be read next year. I can't, it's just so long, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to read it at a time when I get better at multi-reading, because right now I'm a pretty strict monogamous reader, but I don't know if I'll want to sort of commit 3 months to reading this. But I also don't know if I want to go just full degenerate and read this like 12 hours a day so I can finish it in a month. I know I read Infinite Jest something like 4 or 5 hours a day, and it took me 3 weeks, and this has got, an extra 400 pages on top of that. So yeah. All right, we're down to the top 3. These are books that are so large that now they have to be split into different books. I have Brandon Sanderson's Rhythm of War, which is 1,411 pages. Rhythm of War Part 1 and Part 2. I've not read this, but I have read the rest of the Stormlight Archive up to this, and I don't know how I really feel. Like, I enjoy the Stormlight Archive, and I enjoy that there's at least one long-running fantasy series that I'm sort of following, but aside from The Name of the Wind, which we don't know when/if that'll ever be finished, and so I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I should just keep through with Sanderson's Rhythm of War, because we never know. Well, at least we know that this will be finished relatively quickly, and he's working on number 5 now. So, and I kind of like it. I've just not gotten around to Rhythm of War, but Oathbringer was really, really good, and I thought for sure Oathbringer was longer than this, but no, Rhythm of War so far, the latest one has been the longest. Next up, of course, actually the second longest book that I have and that I have read, The Lord of the Rings, Parts 1, 2, and 3, or just The Lord of the Rings, 1,567 pages, and I have read these. I love these so much. I love the movies. I really love the books. I love everything about this. The Lord of the Rings is just glorious, and I really love that in these editions, the page numbers do continue. So when you start reading, the Return of the King. Return of the King, I had the brain fart and I didn't know if it was Return of a King, but no. We just start back in and we're on page 980 or 977. So The Lord of the Rings, of course, it had to be on the list. Okay, and lucky last, the biggest book that I own, it is Robert Musil's The Man Without Qualities. This collection, this was published by Vintage. This Vintage collection is 1,774 pages. A famously unfinished book by Robert Musil. The Man Without Qualities. I don't know a lot about this book. I've heard it being talked about by a couple of people, of course, Leaf by Leaf, but then also the Feeling Bookish podcast, and some other people. I've seen it floating, dancing around, but this is the font size seems pretty reasonable, and I think considering the fact that a lot of the second book, which is the bigger one, the part 2, there's a lot of posthumous papers. So actually I'm trying to find the page, but from page about 1,130 onwards to the end, these are posthumous papers. So obviously, I imagine you still need to read them, but that's this is that. I think that's why we get a lot of the book is so quantitative, and I don't know how organized those posthumous papers are, but this is something that I'll read just based on the idea of it. I think this is something that I would rather read before like Tale of Genji or War of Peace, but those are the biggest books that I own, and I hope you enjoyed this little dive into my library. Regular programming will return. I'll have some reviews for books coming up, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what's the biggest in size and longest in page count books that you own, and some that you think, or out of these, which ones do you think I should read or I should bump up on my TBR shelf. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.